Count 1, malice murder, I find the defendant guilty. Count 2, felony murder, I find the defendant guilty.
Jose Ibarra guilty on all 10 counts for the murder of Georgia nursing student Laken Riley. A judge just sentenced Ibarra to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Thank you for joining me on Local News Live. I'm Deborah Alfarone. This case has gained national attention in part because of Ibarra's status as an undocumented migrant from Venezuela. Local News Live correspondent Sarah Hammond has been in the courtroom all week.
Judge Patrick Haggard came back into the courtroom just 10 minutes after both sides finished presenting their closing arguments to read his verdict of guilty on all 10 counts. As he read each of those counts with the guilty verdict, you could hear Laken Riley's family audibly gasping in the courtroom while Jose Ibarra sat stone-faced. Take a listen to some of the final moments of those closing arguments on day 4 and the final day of this trial. On day 4 of this trial, the prosecution summarized their case to Judge Patrick Haggard, saying DNA, video, and digital evidence prove Jose Ibarra is the man who killed Laken Riley on UGA's campus.
He did fight, and it is a direct result of that fight that gives you all the physical evidence you need to convict him.
Special Prosecutor Sheila Ross outlines the evidence of both Ibarra and Riley's blood on a jacket the suspect is seen throwing in a dumpster at Ibarra's apartment complex. A selfie taken the morning of the murder of Ibarra wearing that jacket, and Ibarra's DNA under Riley's fingernails and scratches on Ibarra's body.
She marked him for everyone to see.
In their closing arguments, the defense argues Ibarra's brother Diego could have been the man seen in videos shown in court. They say Diego is more physically fit and taller than Jose and could have more easily overtaken Riley on that trail. They also point out the brothers share clothes and DNA could have been transferred over. Ross calls the theory that Diego is the killer desperate.
He would need the magic pixie dust to put his brother's thumbprint on her phone. He would need the magic pixie dust to put his brother's DNA underneath Laken Riley's fingernails. And he would also, in addition to that, because of the video evidence, he would need one other thing, and that would be Harry Potter's invisible cloak.
As the judge said he was ready to move forward with sentencing for Jose Ibarra today, he called the prosecution's evidence overwhelming and powerful. In Athens, Sarah Hammond for Local News Live.
Thank you, Sarah. The other big case back in the headlines today. Susan Smith denied release from prison. You may remember she was convicted of murdering her 2 young sons in South Carolina in 1994. Smith strapped her 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alex into her car and let it roll into a lake. This case touched the nation, with many calling those young victims America's children. At first, Smith claimed a man had stolen her car with the boys inside. She later confessed and was convicted to life in prison. Under the law in place at the time, she'd be eligible for parole after 30 years, which brings us to today. In court, Smith cried as she expressed how sorry she is. She said she'd do anything to go back and change what she did. But the boy's father pleaded with the South Carolina Parole Board to keep her behind bars, which they did. Local News Live correspondent Grace Runkle spoke to David Smith ahead of today's hearing.
I would like to say to whoever has my children that they please bring them home.
30 years ago, David Smith stood alongside the mother of his children as she pleaded for the return of their little boys. Today, he has a different plea.
That would be a total injustice if she was to get out. That wouldn't be any justice to Michael and Alex.
On an October night in 1994, Susan Smith strapped their sons, 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alex, into their car seats. Then she let the car roll down a boat ramp and into a lake. For 9 days, she lied to her estranged husband, her family, her community, and the nation, saying a black man carjacked her and took off with the boys inside. Then the truth came out. A jury found her guilty, but voted on giving her a life sentence instead of the death penalty.
We are disappointed, but it wasn't our choice on what penalty she was to receive.
A disappointment David says he still feels to this day.
It was just such a terrible thing that she did. And then her trying to get away with it for 9 days, trying to lie and cover it up. I still think she should have got the death penalty.
When Susan Smith was sentenced to life, South Carolina law was different. It meant she could have the chance at parole in 30 years. The jury was not allowed to know this.
I have people now, in the last few months, have said they saw stuff on TV about the parole coming up. And they were like, I thought she got life in prison. I said, no, not at that time. That wasn't an option.
Her parole hearing is set for November 20th, a day David has been dreading for decades.
Has this year been on your mind for a while?
I have been dreading this year for almost 30 years.
His message to those of you watching, remember who was really a victim.
I want to remind people of what she did, and I want them to remember who lost their life. You know, she's still been living for 30 years. Is in prison, but she's still able to wake up every day.
And another message to all of you still praying for him and thinking of his boys.
I have been fortunate and blessed with 2 more children. I am married now. The pain isn't there like it used to be.
Happy birthday, dear Alex.
I just want people to see that I'm doing okay now. It's been a long, hard road. There were some really dark times, but I'm doing okay. I have put my life back together and I have moved forward. I'll never forget Michael and Alex, and I will always miss them, but I'm okay.
Again, a one-on-one interview with David Smith by our Grace Runkle. And just to reiterate, today was that hearing. Susan Smith denied parole after 30 years behind bars. Okay, to another story now. A man died in prison. His family says it was due to pure neglect. And sadly, this happens in prisons all over the country. And get this, the payout a family may receive depends on where their loved one dies. We're going to take you inside our investigation.